The sheer volume of artillery fire is staggering. A common historical fact is that the Battle of the Somme, for instance, began with a week-long artillery bombardment, during which over 1.7 million shells were fired by the British alone. Imagine that, a continuous earth-shattering roar for 7 days and nights, transforming the landscape into a lunar wasteland. You can almost feel the ground vibrating constantly, a low hum beneath your feet, a testament to the ceaseless bombardment. It's a sound that becomes ingrained in your very being, a constant reminder of the destructive power unleashed upon this land. A unique and little-known detail about the subterranean war was the use of listening devices, or geophones. These were essentially highly sensitive microphones placed in the ground or against the tunnel walls, allowing engineers to detect the faint sounds of enemy digging. Imagine the tension of listening through these devices, trying to discern the subtle differences between natural earth sounds and the telltale signs of enemy activity. It was a high-stakes game of acoustic detection, where a single misinterpretation could lead to disaster. You might even see a technical expert with a strange contraption pressed to the earth, his face a mask of concentration. You find yourself stumbling forward, pushed along by the anonymous mass behind you, a sea of khaki and fear. The air, once crisp with the promise of morning, now assaults your senses with an immediate, overwhelming stench. It's a cocktail of damp earth, unwashed bodies, stale food, and something else, a faint, sickly sweet odor that you instinctively know is decay. This isn't the romanticized battlefield you might have read about. This is a muddy, claustrophobic labyrinth, carved into the very skin of the earth. You've just arrived at the front, and the reality of the Western Front hits you with the force of a physical blow. The threat of camouflage mines is another terrifying aspect of this underground warfare. These were smaller charges designed not to create a crater on the surface, but to destroy enemy tunnels and counter-mining efforts. If you were in a tunnel when a camouflage went off nearby, the concussive force could be enough to kill you instantly, or cause the tunnel to collapse, burying you alive. It's a silent, insidious threat, a constant reminder that danger lurks not just above, but below as well. Your boots, heavy and stiff, sink slightly into the churned mud with each step. The trench floor is a treacherous mix of water, clay, and discarded debris. You try to keep your balance, your rifle feeling like an unnatural extension of your arm, its weight suddenly immense. The walls of the trench rise high above your head, sometimes shored up with sandbags, sometimes just raw, unstable earth. They press in on you, a constant reminder of your confinement. The sky, a narrow strip of gray, seems impossibly far away, a cruel joke of freedom just out of reach. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the overall strategic effectiveness of large-scale mining operations in breaking the trench stalemate. While some mines, like the ones at Messines Ridge, achieved spectacular local successes, historians debate whether they truly offered a viable long-term solution to the static nature of the Western Front. Given their immense cost in terms of resources and lives, was it a brilliant tactical innovation, or a desperate measure that ultimately proved unsustainable? You, however, are simply concerned with whether the ground beneath your feet will hold. The sounds are just as disorienting. There's the constant, low thrum of distant artillery, a deep, resonant growl that vibrates through the very ground beneath your feet. It's a sound that becomes the heartbeat of the front, a relentless pulse of destruction. Closer. You hear the sharp crack of a rifle, the whiz of a bullet passing overhead, unnervingly close. Then there are the human sounds, the low murmur of voices, a cough, a nervous laugh, the clink of metal against metal. Every sound is amplified. Every whisper seems to carry, adding to the pervasive sense of unease. You realize quickly that silence here is never truly silent. It's merely the brief absence of overt violence, a deceptive calm before the next storm. The psychological toll on the tunnelers themselves is immense. They work in complete darkness, often for hours on end, surrounded by the constant threat of collapse, gas, or enemy counterattacks. The isolation, the claustrophobia, and the constant fear take a heavy toll on their mental state. You hear stories of men who simply couldn't take it anymore, breaking down under the pressure, their minds shattered by the subterranean nightmare. They are the unsung heroes of the war, fighting a battle that few ever see or truly understand. As you shuffle along, you notice the details, the grim realities that are now your world. The trench isn't a straight line. It zigs and zags, a defensive measure against enfilading fire. You pass dugouts, crude shelters carved into the earth, their entrances dark and foreboding. Some are simple holes, others are reinforced with timber, offering a fleeting promise of safety from the constant barrage. You glimpse faces in the dim light, pale, drawn, etched with a weariness that seems to go bone deep. Their eyes, though, hold something else, a flicker of grim determination, a shared understanding of the nightmare they inhabit. Sometimes, the underground war erupts into brutal hand-to-hand combat. If two opposing tunnels meet, or if one side breaks into the other's workings, the battle is fought with picks, shovels, and bayonets in the confined, suffocating darkness. It's a terrifying primal struggle, like where there's no room to maneuver, and every blow is delivered with desperate ferocity. You might hear a veteran tell a grim joke about how, at least in the tunnels, you don't have to worry about the weather, a small mercy in a world of none. A common historical fact often overlooked is the sheer scale of these trench systems. They weren't just isolated ditches. They stretched for hundreds of miles, from the Belgian coast to the Swiss border, forming an intricate, interconnected web of fortifications, communication lines, and dugouts. Imagine digging a ditch from New York to Chicago, then adding countless side tunnels, machine gun nests, and barbed wire entanglements. It was an engineering marvel of misery. You're not just in a trench, you're in a subterranean city dedicated to war. The danger of gas in the tunnels is also particularly acute. If a gas attack occurs on the surface, the gas can seep into the tunnel systems, trapping the men below. The air in the tunnels is already poor, and the gas can quickly become concentrated, turning the confined space into a death trap. You might even hear a dark quip that the only thing worse than gas on the surface is gas when you're 20 feet underground with nowhere to run. You pass a group of soldiers huddled together, their faces streaked with mud, their uniforms caked and stiff. One of them is trying to light a cigarette, his hands shaking slightly. The flame flickers, illuminating his gaunt features for a moment, before dying out. You feel a pang of something akin to pity, but it's quickly swallowed by your own burgeoning fear. You're all in this together, a collective of strangers bound by the shared experience of terror. The work of the tunnelers also involved the painstaking process of removing the excavated earth. This spoil had to be carefully removed and disguised so as not to betray the location of the tunnels to enemy aerial reconnaissance. Imagine the effort involved in digging tons of earth and then camouflaging it, all while under the constant threat of observation and bombardment. It was a meticulous, dangerous task that required immense discipline and secrecy. The air grows heavier, more oppressive. You realize the smell of decay isn't just from the earth, it's from something far more immediate. A unique and little-known detail about trench life was the prevalence of trench rats. These weren't your average city rodents. They were massive, bold, and thrived on the abundant food source provided by human casualties and refuse. They were a constant, unsettling presence, scuttling through the mud, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. You might even feel one brush against your leg, sending a shiver of disgust and fear up your spine. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the dehumanizing conditions. You learn to recognize the subtle signs of underground activity: a faint tremor in the ground, a slight shift in the earth, an unusual silence from a particular section of the enemy line. These can all be indicators that something is happening beneath the surface. Your senses become hyper-alert, constantly scanning for any clue that might signal an impending mine explosion or a breakthrough by enemy tunnelers. It's a constant state of vigilance, adding to the already immense mental strain. You finally reach your assigned section, a small, muddy stretch of trench that will be your home for the foreseeable future. The sergeant, a grizzled man with eyes that have seen too much, barks out orders. You're shown your firing step, a raised platform from which you're expected to observe and engage the enemy. Looking over the parapet, through a narrow gap in the sandbags, you see it for the first time no man's land. It's a desolate, scarred landscape, pockmarked with shell craters, littered with the twisted remains of barbed wire, and eerily silent in the immediate foreground. It's a place where life simply doesn't exist, a barren wasteland of death. The sheer scale of the underground networks created during the war is difficult to comprehend. Not just the offensive and defensive mining tunnels, but also vast systems of underground dugouts, command posts, and even hospitals, all carved out of the earth to provide protection from the relentless artillery bombardment. These underground cities were a testament to the desperate need for shelter, a grim reflection of the destructive power of modern warfare. You might even hear a soldier joke that they're building a new underground railway system, just for the rats. The silence is broken by a sudden, ear-splitting shriek overhead, followed by a thunderous explosion that shakes the very ground. A shell has landed somewhere nearby, sending a shower of mud and debris raining down. You instinctively duck, your heart pounding against your ribs. This is it. This is the reality. The initial shock gives way to a cold, creeping dread. You realize that every moment here is a gamble, every breath a stolen luxury. The psychological impact of being constantly aware of the hidden war below you is profound. You feel vulnerable, exposed, knowing that at any moment, the ground could open up and swallow you whole. It's a different kind of fear from the shells and bullets, a more insidious, creeping dread that comes from the unknown. You can't see it, you can't fight it directly, but you know it's there. A silent, subterranean threat. The days quickly blur into an endless cycle of watch duty, digging, repairing, and waiting. The sun, when it appears, offers little comfort, only highlighting the squalor. The nights are worse, filled with the constant threat of enemy patrols, the chilling sound of distant machine guns, and the gnawing cold. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful and shallow, haunted by the sounds and smells of the trench. The stories of heroism and sacrifice in the tunnels are numerous, though often unrecorded. Men would volunteer for these incredibly dangerous assignments, knowing the risks involved, driven by a sense of duty or a desire to protect their comrades. They faced death in silence, in darkness, their courage often going unnoticed by the wider world. They are the true unsung heroes of the trenches, fighting a war that was as brutal and terrifying as any above ground. You quickly learn the unspoken rules, the subtle cues that mean the difference between life and death, the way the mud shifts, the faint whistle of a shell, the sudden silence from the enemy lines. Each is a sign, a warning. You become acutely aware of your own vulnerability, the thin line separating you from the chaos of no man's land. Your senses are heightened, your nerves frayed, constantly on edge. It's a life lived on the brink, where every shadow holds a potential threat, and every sound could be your last. The constant dampness and lack of ventilation in the tunnels also led to a host of health problems for the tunnelers, including respiratory illnesses, rheumatic conditions, and psychological disorders. The physical and mental strain of their work was immense, and many suffered lifelong consequences. It's a grim reminder that even if you survived the immediate dangers of the tunnels, the war would leave its mark on you forever. The sheer monotony of it all is almost as terrifying as the danger. Hours stretch into days, days into weeks, each one a carbon copy of the last. You eat cold, tasteless rations, drink muddy water, and try to find some semblance of comfort in the cramped, damp confines of your dugout. The lice, a constant companion, crawl over your skin, an irritating reminder of your degraded existence. You scratch, you curse, but there's no escape. It's a small indignity in a world of immense ones. You find yourself appreciating the relative openness of the main trench, despite its horrors. At least there, you can see the sky, feel the wind, and have some sense of space. The thought of being trapped in those dark, narrow tunnels with tons of earth above you fills you with a deep sense of dread. It's a claustrophobic nightmare, a true testament to the lengths men would go to survive, and to destroy. One of the academic debates still open for discussion revolves around the true psychological impact of the initial trench experience. Did the immediate shock of the environment cause a rapid onset of shell shock? Or was it a cumulative effect of prolonged exposure? The lines are blurry, and the individual experiences varied wildly, making it a complex area of study. You, however, are simply trying to survive the next 5 minutes. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the ethical implications of mining warfare. Was it a legitimate tactic, or did it cross a line into a form of warfare that was inherently more cruel and indiscriminate, given the risk of burying men alive? The moral complexities of such tactics continue to be debated by military ethicists and historians, You, however, are just trying to avoid being on the wrong side of a massive explosion. You find yourself developing a dark sense of humor, a coping mechanism against the overwhelming despair. Someone cracks a joke about the rats being better fed than the soldiers, and a ripple of strained laughter goes through the group. It's a brief, fleeting moment of levity, a tiny spark of humanity in the darkness. You even hear a dark jest about the mud being so thick. It could probably hold a political debate without anyone sinking. It's a grim chuckle out, but a chuckle nonetheless. Another soldier, trying to lighten the mood, quips that his trench foot is so advanced, he's pretty sure he could win a prize at a swamp monster convention. You manage a weak smile. You might hear a grim joke about the tunnelers being the moles of the army. Always digging, always out of sight. Or perhaps a quip that they're just trying to find a shortcut to Berlin, bypassing all the mud on the surface. These small moments of dark humor are a way of coping with the unimaginable, of finding a sliver of light in the overwhelming darkness. The days bleed into one another, marked only by the shifting of watches and the occasional, terrifying burst of enemy fire. You learn to sleep standing up, leaning against the muddy wall, your rifle clutched tight. You learn to ignore the cold, the damp, the constant itching. You learn to live with the fear, to push it down, to function despite its suffocating presence. This isn't just war, it's an endurance test of the human spirit. A brutal stripping away of everything you once knew about comfort and safety. You are no longer just a person. You are a cog in a vast grinding machine. And your sole purpose is to survive. The subterranean war is a constant, unseen struggle. A battle of wits and engineering prowess played out in the dark. It's a reminder that the trenches are not just ditches in the ground. They are complex, layered systems of defense and attack, extending both above and below the surface. You are a part of this vast, intricate machine. And even when you're not actively fighting underground, the knowledge of that hidden war is always there. A chilling presence beneath your feet. A silent, deadly secret of the trenches. The initial shock of the trenches, that raw, visceral assault on your senses, slowly begins to morph into something more insidious. A pervasive, bone-deep fear that never truly leaves you. It's not just the fear of a shell landing directly on your head, or a sniper's bullet finding its mark. It's the constant, gnawing anxiety that permeates every waking moment, and even seeps into your troubled sleep. You learn to live with it, to function despite it, but it's always there, a cold hand gripping your heart. As you endure the relentless horrors of the trenches, you begin to grasp a truth more profound than any grand strategy or heroic charge survival. Here isn't just about fighting, it's about logistics. It's about the endless, grinding effort to keep men fed, armed, and supplied in a landscape designed to consume everything. You are a small part of a vast, intricate machine, and the smooth functioning of that machine, however imperfect, is the only thing standing between you and utter collapse. You're constantly aware of the enemy, even when you can't see them. Their presence is felt in the distant thud of their artillery, the subtle shift in the wind carrying the faint scent of their cooking fires, or the sudden, chilling silence that descends upon no man's land, a silence that often precedes an attack. Your ears become finely tuned instruments, picking up every rustle, every distant shout, every faint click of a rifle bolt. You learn to distinguish between the sounds of your own side and theirs, a skill that could mean the difference between life and death. Every day, the arrival of rations is a small, desperate victory. You watch with keen eyes as the supply parties, often under the cover of darkness, navigate the treacherous communication trenches, bringing up the vital sustenance. The sight of a fresh loaf of bread, even if it's stale by the time it reaches you, or a tin of bully beef, is enough to spark a flicker of hope. You quickly learn that food isn't just fuel, it's morale, a tangible link to the world outside, a reminder that you haven't been completely forgotten. The distribution is often chaotic, a scramble in the mud, but everyone gets their share, however meager. The nights are particularly brutal. The darkness amplifies every sound. Every shadow seems to move with malevolent intent. You stand on watch, peering over the parapet into the inky blackness, your eyes straining to catch any movement. The barbed wire, a tangled, menacing barrier, stretches out before you, its silhouette barely visible against the faint glow of distant flares. Every now and then, a flare arcs into the sky, illuminating no man's land in an eerie, fleeting burst of light, turning the desolate landscape into a surreal, monochrome painting. For those few seconds, everything is starkly revealed: the shell craters, the twisted metal, the unburied dead, before plunging back into darkness. Water, perhaps even more than food, is a constant concern. The trench water is undrinkable, a murky brew of mud, chemicals, and worse. Fresh water has to be brought up in large containers, often from miles behind the lines. You ration your sips carefully, each drop precious, knowing that dehydration can be as deadly as any bullet. The taste, often metallic or chlorinated, is a small price to pay for survival. You might even hear a grim joke about how the only thing cleaner than their water is their conscience, which is saying something. The cold is a constant companion, seeping into your bones, making your fingers and toes ache with a dull, persistent pain. Your uniform, perpetually damp and muddy, offers little protection. You shiver, stamping your feet to keep the circulation going. But the cold seems to have settled deep within you, a part of your very being. You dream of warmth, of dry clothes, of a hot meal. But these are distant, unattainable luxuries. A common historical fact, often overlooked in the focus on battles, is the sheer logistical nightmare of supplying millions of men across hundreds of miles of front. It required an unprecedented mobilization of railways, roads, and countless human and animal resources. Imagine the vast network of supply lines, stretching from distant factories and farms all the way to your muddy dugout. A constant, vulnerable artery pumping life into the front. Every shell fired, every ration eaten, every clean pair of socks worn was a testament to this immense logistical effort. The fear isn't just about physical injury, it's about the psychological toll. You witness things that will forever be seared into your memory: the sudden, violent death of a comrade, the screams of the wounded, the grotesque aftermath of a direct hit. These images replay in your mind, haunting your waking hours and invading your nightmares. You try to build a wall around your emotions, to detach yourself from the horror. But it's a losing battle. The sheer weight of human suffering is overwhelming, and it slowly grinds away at your soul. A unique and little-known detail about trench logistics was the widespread use of trench railways, or light railways. These narrow-gauge tracks, often hastily laid and constantly repaired, snaked through the communication trenches and behind the lines, allowing for the more efficient transport of supplies, ammunition, and even wounded soldiers than relying solely on human porters or pack animals in the deep mud. Imagine the sight of a tiny locomotive puffing its way through the desolate landscape, a surreal symbol of industrial efficiency in the heart of chaos. A common historical fact, often highlighted in documentaries, is the concept of going over the top. This was the terrifying act of climbing out of the relative safety of the trench and advancing across no man's land towards enemy lines, often under heavy machine gun fire. Imagine the sheer, gut-wrenching terror of that moment, knowing that your chances of survival were astronomically low. Yet, men did it, day after day, driven by duty, camaraderie, or simply the desperate hope of ending the stalemate. Ammunition is another critical supply. You learn to conserve your rounds, to make every shot count. The sound of fresh ammunition boxes being brought up is a reassuring one. A reminder that you can still fight, still defend yourself. The sheer weight of the bullets, the grenades, the mortar shells is immense. And you often participate in forming human chains to pass them forward, hand over hand, through the narrow, winding trenches. It's a collective effort, a silent dance of survival. The waiting is perhaps the worst part. The endless, agonizing wait for the next attack, the next barrage, the next order to advance. You sit in your dugout, listening to the distant rumble, your nerves stretched taut. Every minute feels like an hour, every hour an eternity. The tension builds, a palpable presence in the cramped space, until it becomes almost unbearable. Then, sometimes, nothing happens. The silence returns, and the cycle of anticipation and dread begins anew. It's a form of psychological torture designed to break even the strongest wills. The constant need for new equipment is also relentless. Your uniform wears out, your boots fall apart in the mud, your rifle jams from the pervasive grime. Replacements are always needed, and the quartermasters, far behind the lines, are constantly trying to meet the insatiable demands of the front. You might receive a new pair of socks, a small luxury that feels like a miracle, or a replacement bayonet. A grim reminder of the close quarters combat that awaits. You try to find small comforts, tiny distractions to keep your mind from spiraling into despair. Letters from home become precious lifelines. Read and reread until the paper is soft and worn. Photographs of loved ones or cherished possessions, a reminder of the world you left behind. A world that seems increasingly distant and unreal. You share stories, jokes, and cigarettes with your comrades, forging bonds of brotherhood that are stronger than any fear. These moments of shared humanity are brief, but they are vital, offering a fleeting respite from the omnipresent dread. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the extent to which logistical failures or successes impacted the strategic outcomes of specific battles or even the overall course of the war. Were some offensives doomed from the start due to inadequate supply lines? Or did brilliant logistical planning sometimes enable seemingly impossible victories? The interplay between the frontline fight and the unseen, tireless work of the supply chain is a complex area of historical inquiry. You, however, are just hoping your next meal arrives on time. A unique and little-known detail about trench life was the elaborate system of listening posts. These were small, shallow pits dug out into no man's land, often at night, where a few soldiers would lie silently, straining to hear any enemy movements, digging, or preparations for an attack. It was an incredibly dangerous assignment, requiring immense courage and stillness, as discovery meant almost certain death. Imagine lying in the darkness, just meters from the enemy, every nerve screaming, knowing that a single cough or misplaced breath could betray your position. The sheer volume of waste generated in the trenches is also a logistical challenge. Empty tins, discarded equipment, human waste, it all accumulates, adding to the squalor and attracting the ever-present rats. Sanitation parties work tirelessly, trying to keep the trenches as clean as possible, but it's a losing battle against the scale of the problem. You might even hear a soldier joke that their trench is so well stocked with rubbish, it could probably start its own antique shop. Hey guys, tonight we're going to step back in time. Not to a grand ballroom or a bustling marketplace, but to a place where the earth itself seemed to groan under the weight of human suffering. The trenches of the First World War. Imagine, if you will, the biting chill of a European autumn. The air thick with the scent of damp earth, stale sweat, and something far more sinister. Something metallic and cloying. You're not just reading about history tonight. You're going to feel the cold, damp clay clinging to your boots, hear the distant, guttural rumble of artillery, and perhaps, just perhaps, understand why surviving even a single day in this landscape was a miracle. A little heads up if you were actually there. Chances are you wouldn't have made it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The role of the stretcher bearers is another vital and yet often unsung aspect of logistics. These brave men, often unarmed, venture into no man's land or the most dangerous parts of the trenches to retrieve the wounded, bringing them back to the aid stations for treatment. Their work is incredibly dangerous, performed under fire, and their dedication is a testament to the bonds of camaraderie that exist even in this hell. You watch them with a mixture of admiration and dread, knowing that one day, you might be the one they are carrying. The rats, those omnipresent, grotesque companions, continue to be a source of constant irritation and morbid fascination. They scurry through the mud, bold and unafraid, feasting on the refuse and the dead. You learn to live with them, to ignore their presence. But sometimes, in the dead of night, you'll hear their scratching in the walls of your dugout, or feel one brush against your face as you try to sleep. It's a grim reminder of the degraded conditions, and a testament to the fact that even in this hell, life, in its most basic form, finds a way to thrive. You might even joke darkly that the rats are the real winners of this war, getting fat off everyone else's misery. The psychological impact of the constant struggle for supplies is subtle but pervasive. You learn to appreciate every scrap, every piece of equipment, every drop of water. You become resourceful, improvising solutions to problems, making do with what you have. The scarcity breeds a grim determination, a refusal to give up, even when faced with overwhelming odds. It's a constant reminder of your vulnerability, but also of your resilience. The constant dampness and lack of proper hygiene lead to a host of ailments. Trench foot, a horrifying condition caused by prolonged exposure to cold. Wet conditions is a common affliction. Your feet swell, turn numb, and if left untreated, can lead to gangrene and amputation. You try to keep your feet as dry as possible, changing socks whenever you can, but it's a losing battle in this perpetually sodden environment. The lice, as you remember from before, are still there, a constant maddening itch that never truly goes away. You scratch until your skin is raw, but the relief is only temporary. The transport of the wounded from the front lines to the field hospitals, and then further back to larger medical facilities, was a massive logistical undertaking. Imagine the long, agonizing journey for a severely wounded soldier, carried on a stretcher through muddy trenches, then perhaps by ambulance or train, each bump and jostle adding to their pain. It was a testament to the dedication of the medical services, but also a grim illustration of the sheer scale of human suffering. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the extent to which shell shock was a purely psychological condition versus one with significant physiological components, perhaps related to concussive blasts or prolonged stress on the nervous system. Early understanding was limited, and many soldiers suffering from it were simply labeled as cowards or malingerers, a tragic oversight that compounded their suffering. You, however, yes, are just trying to keep your own mind from breaking under the relentless pressure. You might hear a weary soldier quip that the only thing more reliable than enemy shells is the fact that his boots will always be wet. Or perhaps a dark joke about the supply lines being so efficient. They can even deliver fresh mud directly to your dugout. These small moments of levity are a way of coping with the relentless grind, of finding a shred of humor in the face of overwhelming adversity. You learn to appreciate the small things: a hot cup of tea, a dry cigarette, a moment of sunshine breaking through the clouds. These fleeting comforts become incredibly significant, small islands of normalcy in a sea of chaos. You share your meager rations with your comrades, a silent pact of survival. There's a strange sense of camaraderie that develops in the trenches, a bond forged in shared hardship and mutual reliance. You trust these men with your life, and they trust you with theirs. The constant movement of men, fresh troops arriving, exhausted men rotating out, wounded being evacuated, is another logistical challenge. The communication trenches are a constant hive of activity, a never-ending flow of bodies moving in both directions. You see the fresh faces, full of naive optimism, and you see the weary, hollow-eyed veterans, their spirits broken by the war. It's a stark contrast, a constant reminder of the cycle of life and death in the trenches. The fear of gas attacks is another ever-present terror. You've seen the drills, practiced donning your gas mask, but the thought of that insidious, invisible enemy creeping across no man's land fills you with a unique dread. The warning cry, "Gas, gas, gas," is enough to send a jolt of adrenaline through your body, your hands fumbling with the mask, your breath catching in your throat. The sight of a gas cloud, rolling slowly towards your lines, is a truly terrifying spectacle, a silent, deadly wave of poison. You might even hear someone quip that at least the gas makes the rats run for cover. A small mercy. The role of horses and mules in the logistical chain is also significant, especially in the early stages of the war. They pulled wagons, carried supplies, and transported artillery pieces through the mud and over the broken terrain. Their suffering was immense, often working until they dropped from exhaustion or were killed by shell fire. They were unsung heroes, their silent contributions vital to the war effort. The letters from home, though a source of comfort, also highlight the growing chasm between your reality and theirs. They write of mundane things, garden parties, village gossip, the price of bread, while you are living in a world of mud, blood, and death. You try to write back, to convey something of your experience, but the words feel inadequate, hollow. How do you explain the smell of decay, the constant fear, the sheer exhaustion, to someone who has never known anything but peace? It's a gap that widens with each passing day, making you feel increasingly isolated, even from those you love most. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the extent to which the industrial capacity of the warring nations determined the outcome of the war. Was it the ability to produce and deliver vast quantities of shells, weapons, and supplies that ultimately decided the victor, more so than individual bravery or tactical brilliance. The war of attrition was as much a battle of factories and supply chains as it was of men in the trenches. The sound of machine gun fire, a rapid, rhythmic stutter, becomes another grim soundtrack to your life. It's a sound that instantly conjures images of bodies falling, of desperate charges across no man's land. You learn to distinguish between the different types of machine guns, their distinct rhythms telling you something about the enemy's position or intentions. It's a chillingly efficient sound, a harbinger of death, and it's a sound you will never forget. You might even joke that the machine guns are practicing for a concert, a symphony of destruction. The maintenance of communication lines, telephone wires, signaling lamps, and runners was another vital logistical task. These fragile lifelines, constantly being cut by shellfire, had to be repaired under dangerous conditions to ensure that orders could be transmitted and intelligence gathered. You might see linesmen, their faces grim, venturing out into dangerous areas to mend a broken wire, knowing that the lives of many depend on their success. You find yourself becoming increasingly fatalistic. You see men come and go, some wounded, some killed, some simply disappearing into the vast, anonymous maw of the war. You stop asking questions. Stop dwelling on the why. Your focus narrows to the immediate present surviving the next hour, the next shift, the next attack. The future is an abstract concept, too distant and uncertain to contemplate. You live moment to moment, your existence reduced to the most basic instinct self-preservation. The sheer scale of the logistical effort is almost incomprehensible. Millions of tons of food, ammunition, equipment, and medical supplies had to be manufactured, transported, and distributed to the front lines every single day. It was a monumental undertaking, requiring immense coordination and countless hours of tireless labor, often performed by men and women far removed from the fighting. The constant noise, the lack of sleep, the poor diet, and the perpetual stress combine to create a state of chronic exhaustion. Your body aches, your mind feels sluggish, and your reactions are slower than they should be. You fight against the urge to simply give up, to let the overwhelming fatigue consume you. But there's a stubborn spark of life within you, a primal will to survive that keeps you going, even when every fiber of your being screams for rest. You are a ghost, moving through a landscape of ghosts, all clinging to the faintest glimmer of hope. You find yourself becoming incredibly resourceful, learning to mend your own uniform, to patch your boots, to make do with what little you have. You learn to appreciate the ingenuity of your comrades, their ability to improvise solutions to seemingly impossible problems. It's a testament to the human capacity for adaptation, even in the most dire of circumstances. As the days turn into weeks, and the weeks into a seemingly endless stretch of time, the pervasive fear you've come to know is joined by another, equally relentless adversary, the mud. It is everywhere, an omnipresent, clinging, suffocating force that defines your existence in the trenches. You live in it, you sleep in it, and sometimes you fear you might even drown in it. The earth, churned by countless boots, explosions, and the relentless rain, has transformed into a thick, viscous goo that sucks at your boots with every step. The constant hum of activity behind the lines, the distant sounds of trains and lorries, are a reminder of the unseen logistical effort that keeps you alive. It's a world away from the immediate danger of the front, but it's a world that is inextricably linked to your survival. You're a small piece of a much larger puzzle, and the efficiency of that puzzle determines your fate. Your uniform, which once offered some semblance of military crispness, is now a heavy, sodden mass, caked with layers of dried and fresh mud. It adds significant weight to your already burdened frame, making every movement an effort. The mud seeps into your clothing, clinging to your skin, a constant, cold embrace that never truly leaves you. You try to scrape it off, but it's a futile exercise. As soon as one layer is removed, another begins to form. Your hands, perpetually grimy, feel rough and chapped, the skin cracked from the constant exposure to dampness and cold. The cold, the damp, the constant threat of enemy action. These are your daily realities. But beneath it all, supporting your very existence, is the relentless, unseen work of logistics. It's the constant flow of supplies, the tireless efforts of countless individuals. that allows you to continue fighting, to continue enduring. One muddy, exhausted, rationed day at a time. The distant rumble of trains carrying supplies, the clatter of boots on duckboards, and the whispered orders of quartermasters are the true, unsung lullabies of the front, ensuring that the terrible machine of war keeps grinding on. The trench floor is a treacherous landscape of varying depths of mud. Sometimes it's ankle deep, sometimes knee deep, and in some unfortunate sections, you might find yourself wading through waist-high sludge. Duckboards, wooden planks laid down to provide a slightly elevated path, offer brief respite, but they are often broken, submerged, or simply swept away by the flow of water. You learn to walk with a peculiar shuffling gait, lifting your feet with exaggerated effort, trying to avoid losing a boot in the mire. The sound of boots squelching through the mud becomes another part of the trench symphony, a dull, rhythmic sucking sound that accompanies your every move. As the relentless cycle of trench life grinds on, you become intimately familiar with another grim aspect of this war, the constant presence of injury, illness, and the rudimentary, often horrifying, state of wartime medicine. It's a world where a simple wound can quickly become a death sentence, and where survival often depends as much on luck as it does on the skill of the medical staff. You witness the suffering firsthand, the raw, visceral pain that becomes another constant companion in this landscape of misery. The dugouts. Your only refuge from the elements and enemy fire are little better. While they offer protection, they are often damp, cramped, and perpetually muddy. The earthen walls weep moisture, and the floor is a constant battle against the encroaching slime. You try to lay down a few planks or some straw to create a drier spot, but it's a losing battle. Your sleep, already fitful due to the constant noise and fear, is made even more uncomfortable by the cold, damp ground. You wake up stiff and aching, your body protesting against the relentless chill, the sound of a man crying out. A sudden, sharp scream cutting through the din of battle becomes all too familiar. You see the immediate aftermath, a body crumpled in the mud, a limb twisted at an unnatural angle, blood seeping into the earth. The initial rush to help, the desperate attempts to staunch the flow, are instinctive. But then comes the grim reality of evacuation. Stretcher bearers, those brave, often unarmed men, arrive, their faces grim, and begin the arduous task of moving the wounded. It's a slow, agonizing journey through the narrow, muddy communication trenches, each bump and jostle sending waves of pain through the injured man. The physical toll of this environment is immense. Your muscles are constantly strained from navigating the mud, carrying equipment, and digging. Your skin is irritated, prone to rashes and sores from the dampness and lack of hygiene. The cold seeps into your joints, making them stiff and painful. You are always tired, a deep, pervasive exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to alleviate. Your body is a constant source of discomfort, a testament to the brutal conditions you endure. The aid stations, often just dugouts or makeshift shelters a short distance behind the front line, are scenes of organized chaos. The air is thick with the smell of antiseptic, blood, and human suffering. Doctors and orderlies, their faces pale with exhaustion, work tirelessly, performing amputations, dressing wounds, and administering what little pain relief they have. You might glimpse a man screaming as a wound is cleaned, or another lying silently, his eyes staring blankly at the muddy ceiling. It's a brutal, relentless conveyor belt of human wreckage. A common historical fact that truly underscores the horror of the mud is the number of soldiers who actually drowned in it. Not just in shell craters filled with water, but in the trenches themselves, trapped by its viscous grip, too weak or injured to pull themselves free. Imagine the terror of slowly sinking into that cold, dark abyss, the mud closing over your head. A silent, suffocating death? It's a grim testament to the fact that the environment itself was as deadly as any bullet or shell. A common historical fact, often highlighted in medical accounts of the war, is the sheer volume and severity of shrapnel wounds. Unlike clean bullet wounds, shrapnel from exploding shells would tear through flesh, carrying fragments of clothing, mud, and debris deep into the body, leading to horrific infections. Imagine a wound that isn't just a hole, but a ragged, contaminated mess, a breeding ground for gangrene and tetanus. These injuries were incredibly difficult to treat, and often led to amputations as a last resort to save a life. Food, when it arrives, is often cold, tasteless, and covered in a fine layer of mud or dust. Hardtack biscuits, bully beef, and tea are your staples, providing just enough sustenance to keep you going. You eat quickly, often in silence, your senses dulled by the constant grime. The lack of fresh food and proper nutrition further weakens your body, making you more susceptible to illness. You crave fresh fruit, vegetables, anything that isn't bland and processed, but those are luxuries from a world far away. The lack of effective antibiotics meant that infection was a far greater killer than direct wounds for much of the war. A simple scratch could fester, turning into a life-threatening condition. You see men suffering from gangrene, their limbs turning black and putrid, the smell unmistakable. The only cure, often, is amputation, a brutal procedure performed with limited anesthesia and even more limited hope of full recovery. The sight of piles of severed limbs outside the aid stations is a grim, unforgettable image, a testament to the desperate measures taken to save lives. The sheer scale of the mud problem also led to ingenious, if desperate, solutions. A unique and little-known detail was the use of mud sledges or mud boards, improvised flatboards or small sleds used to transport supplies, ammunition, and even the wounded across the most treacherous, impassable sections of no man's land or deep trenches. These were often pulled by hand, a back-breaking task that highlighted the extreme difficulties of movement in this quagmire. You might even see a group of exhausted men struggling to pull one of these, their faces grimacing with effort. A unique and little-known detail about trench medicine was the use of Carroll Dakin solution for wound irrigation. This antiseptic solution, developed by Alexis Carrel and Henry Drysdale Dakin, involved continuously irrigating deep wounds with a dilute solution of sodium hypochlorite, significantly reducing infection rates. While primitive by modern standards, it was a groundbreaking advancement at the time, offering a glimmer of hope against the pervasive threat of infection. You might see a nurse meticulously setting up a drip, the solution slowly flowing into a wounded man's limb. The smell, as you recall from your first day, has only intensified. The mixture of damp earth, sweat, unwashed bodies, stale food, and the ever-present stench of decay is a constant assault on your nostrils. You become accustomed to it, in a way, but it never truly disappears. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your very skin, a constant reminder of the squalor. You might even find yourself wondering if you'll ever smell anything clean again, anything fresh and pure. Beyond the physical wounds, there's the silent, insidious toll on the mind. Shell shock, as it was then known, is a pervasive and devastating condition. You see men trembling uncontrollably, their eyes wide with a terror that never seems to leave them. Some are mute, unable to speak, while others babble incoherently. Some collapse into catatonic states, their bodies rigid, their minds seemingly elsewhere. It's a terrifying sight, a reminder that the war can break a man's spirit as completely as it can break his body. You might even hear a grim joke that at least if you get shell shock, you'll get a nice, quiet bed away from the mud. The constant dampness and lack of proper hygiene also contribute to the spread of disease. Dysentery, typhoid, and influenza sweep through the trenches, weakening men already on the brink. A simple cut can quickly become infected, turning into a festering sore due to the pervasive bacteria in the mud. You see men coughing, shivering with fever, their bodies succumbing to ailments that would be easily treatable in the world outside. The medical facilities, rudimentary at best, are often overwhelmed, unable to cope with the sheer volume of sick and wounded. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the precise nature and classification of shell shock. Was it purely a psychological reaction to trauma, or did it involve neurological damage from concussive blasts? The medical understanding of the time was limited, leading to misdiagnosis, stigmatization, and often inadequate treatment for those suffering from this debilitating condition. The debate continues to this day, as historians and medical professionals try to unravel the complexities of this profound war-related trauma. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the precise impact of trench conditions on the long-term health of surviving soldiers. Beyond the obvious physical injuries, historians and medical professionals continue to examine how chronic exposure to damp, cold, and unsanitary environments contributed to lifelong respiratory issues, rheumatic conditions, and other debilitating ailments, even years after the war ended. The subtle, insidious ways the trenches continued to claim victims long after the fighting stopped are still being unpacked. The sheer volume of casualties is overwhelming. Every day, men are wounded, killed, or simply disappear. The constant flow of fresh troops arriving at the front is matched by the constant flow of wounded and dead being evacuated. You become desensitized to it, in a way. But the sight of a familiar face being carried away on a stretcher, or the news of a comrade's death, still hits you with a cold, hard pang. You learn to live with the constant threat, to suppress the empathy, but the human cost is always there, a silent, mounting tally. Amidst the grim reality, you find yourself clinging to small moments of dark humor. Someone might quip that if the war doesn't kill them, the mud will surely swallow them whole. Another might joke that they're developing gills from the constant dampness, ready to join the local fish population. You might even hear a weary soldier remark that the only thing growing well in this trench is his beard and the mold on his bread. These are not grand jokes, but small, desperate attempts to find a shred of levity in the face of overwhelming despair. They are a way of acknowledging the absurdity of your situation without succumbing to it entirely. The conditions in the trenches also led to a host of non-combat related illnesses. Trench fever, spread by lice, caused severe body aches, headaches, and fever, debilitating men for weeks. Dysentery, from contaminated food and water, led to severe dehydration and weakness. The cold, damp environment contributed to pneumonia and bronchitis. You are constantly battling illness, your body weakened by poor nutrition and perpetual exhaustion. It's a miracle if you manage to avoid falling ill for long. The sound of the rain when it comes is no longer a gentle patter but a relentless drumming against the sandbags in the ground. It turns the trench into a muddy river, washing away any semblance of dryness. You huddle in your dugout, listening to the deluge, knowing that with every drop, the mud outside is deepening, becoming even more treacherous. The water seeps in, forming puddles on the floor, adding to the pervasive dampness. There's no escape from it, no shelter that is truly dry. The medical personnel, from the doctors and nurses to the orderlies and stretcher bearers, worked under immense pressure and often in incredibly dangerous conditions. They were often exposed to enemy fire, gas attacks, and the same unsanitary conditions as the fighting troops. Their dedication was unwavering, a testament to their commitment to saving lives amidst the carnage. You see their weary faces, their hands stained with blood, and you know they are fighting their own desperate battle against death. You learn to sleep in short bursts, whenever and wherever you can. Sometimes it's leaning against the muddy wall, sometimes curled up in a cramped dugout, your rifle clutched close. The sleep is never truly restful, punctuated by the sounds of the front, the cold, and the constant itching of lice. You dream of soft beds, warm blankets, and the luxury of an uninterrupted night's rest. But these are fading memories, replaced by the harsh reality of your present. The development of blood transfusions, while still in its early stages, was a significant medical advancement during the war. Early methods were crude, but the ability to replace lost blood offered a chance of survival for severely wounded soldiers who would otherwise have bled out. It was a desperate measure, often performed under difficult conditions, but it saved countless lives. You might even hear a soldier quip that at least they're getting a fresh supply of blood, unlike their rations. The sheer physical exertion of trench life is relentless. Beyond the fighting, there's the constant work of maintaining the trench, shoring up collapsing walls, digging drainage ditches, repairing barbed wire. It's back-breaking labor, performed under the constant threat of enemy fire. Your hands are raw, your back aches, and your muscles scream in protest. But the work is essential. Without it, the trench would quickly become uninhabitable. A watery grave. You are perpetually tired, your body pushed to its absolute limits, and then some. The psychological impact of witnessing so much suffering is profound. You see men broken, physically and mentally, and it leaves an indelible mark on your own psyche. You try to harden yourself, to build emotional walls, but the images and sounds of pain are relentless. You find yourself becoming more stoic, less prone to outward displays of emotion, but inside, the scars are accumulating. The lice, those tiny, persistent parasites, are a constant source of torment. They crawl over your skin, their bites leaving itchy, red welts. You try to delouse your uniform, boiling it if you can, or picking them off one by one. But it's a losing battle. They are everywhere. A grim reminder of the lack of hygiene and the dehumanizing conditions. You scratch until your skin is raw, but the relief is only temporary. It's a small indignity, but in this world of immense suffering, it's enough to drive you to the brink of madness. You look at your comrades, their faces gaunt and mud-streaked, their eyes holding the same weariness you feel. There's a silent understanding between you, a shared burden that words cannot express. You help each other, share what little you have, and offer what comfort you can. These bonds of brotherhood are forged in the crucible of the trenches, stronger than any fear or despair. You are a family, albeit a grim one, united by the shared experience of hell. The days continue to blur, marked only by the changing of shifts and the occasional, terrifying burst of activity. You are a creature of routine, your life dictated by the rhythms of the trench. Wake, eat, work, watch, sleep, repeat. It's a monotonous existence, broken only by moments of intense terror. You are a prisoner of the mud, a captive of the cold, and a slave to the constant threat of death. Yet, somehow you endure. One breath, one step, one muddy moment at a time. The world outside the trench feels like a distant dream, a fading memory, and the mud, the cold, and the fear are your new, inescapable reality. You learn to administer basic first aid to yourself and your comrades, how to apply a field dressing, how to improvise a splint, how to carry a wounded man. These are grim but necessary skills, learned out of necessity and the desperate hope of saving a life. You become a medic in your own right, a first responder in a world where every second counts. Even amidst the unending horror, the pervasive mud, and the constant threat of death, you find yourself seeking out, even desperately clinging to, moments of something akin to normalcy. These aren't grand, heroic gestures, but tiny, almost imperceptible pockets of ordinary life, snatched from the jaws of chaos. They are the desperate attempts of the human spirit to assert itself, to remember what it means to be alive, even when surrounded by so much that speaks of death. The sheer scale of medical innovation, driven by the unprecedented casualties of the war, is remarkable. From new surgical techniques to improvements in sanitation and wound care, the conflict forced rapid advancements in medicine. Yet, despite these efforts, the scale of suffering remained immense, a constant reminder of the brutal efficiency of modern warfare. You learn to cherish the arrival of the mail. A letter from home, perhaps from your mother or a sweetheart, is more precious than gold. You tear it open with trembling hands, devouring every word, every mundane detail of a life that seems impossibly distant. The smell of the paper, the familiar handwriting, transports you, if only for a fleeting moment, back to a world of warmth, safety, and love. You read it again and again, until the words blur, and the paper is soft and worn from your touch. These letters are your lifeline, a fragile thread connecting you to the sanity you left behind. You might even find yourself laughing at a particularly silly anecdote, a sound that feels foreign and strange in this grim reality. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the ethical dilemma faced by medical professionals in the trenches. How to prioritize treatment when resources were scarce and casualties were overwhelming. Who received care first? Was it the most severely wounded, or those with the best chance of survival? These were agonizing decisions made under immense pressure, and their moral implications continue to be debated. The simple act of brewing a cup of tea becomes a ritual, a small act of defiance against the dehumanizing conditions. You huddle with your comrades, a small fire flickering in a makeshift brazier, the warmth a welcome antidote to the pervasive cold. The tea, often weak and bitter, is nevertheless a source of comfort. You cup your hands around the mug, feeling the heat seep into your chilled fingers, and for a few minutes, the world outside the dugout seems to recede. You share stories, some true, some embellished, some simply absurd, finding solace in the shared laughter and the fleeting sense of camaraderie. You might hear a dark joke about the doctors being busier than the artillery, given the constant stream of wounded. Or perhaps a quip that the only thing worse than getting hit is getting treated by a doctor who hasn't slept in 3 days. These moments of grim humor are a way of coping with the unimaginable, of finding a sliver of levity in the overwhelming darkness. A common historical fact, often romanticized but rooted in genuine human need, was the unofficial Christmas truce of 1914. Imagine, for a brief, surreal period, the guns falling silent, and soldiers from opposing sides emerging from their trenches, cautiously approaching each other in no man's land. They exchanged cigarettes, shared food, sang carols, and even played impromptu games of football. It was a remarkable, almost unbelievable moment of shared humanity amidst the brutal machinery of war. A testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, the desire for peace and connection can briefly overcome hatred. You, of course, are not experiencing such a truce, but the yearning for it is palpable. The constant threat of injury and illness hangs over you like a dark cloud. Every step you take, every shell that lands, every cough you hear, is a reminder of your own vulnerability. You try to push the thought away, to focus on the immediate task at hand, but the knowledge that you could be next is always there, a cold knot in your stomach. You discover the unexpected beauty in the mundane, the sight of a single wildflower pushing its way through the scarred earth of no man's land, a stubborn testament to life. The fleeting glimpse of a bird soaring freely above the trenches, a stark contrast to your own confinement. The rare sight of a clear night sky, ablaze with stars, reminds you of the vastness of the universe beyond this narrow, muddy strip of hell. These moments are brief, but they are vital, offering a flicker of hope, a reminder that beauty still exists, even in the most desolate of places. You see men return to the front after recovering from wounds, their bodies scarred, their eyes holding a deeper weariness. They are the lucky ones, the survivors, but they carry the indelible marks of their ordeal. Their return is a testament to their resilience, but also a grim reminder that the war demands its pound of flesh again and again. Gambling, in its simplest forms, becomes a popular pastime. A deck of worn cards, a few dice, anything to pass the endless hours of waiting. You gather in a dugout, the air thick with cigarette smoke, the low murmur of voices, and the occasional burst of laughter or groan. The stakes are usually small, a few cigarettes, a ration of rum, but the thrill of the game, the brief escape from reality, is immense. It's a way to feel alive, to exert some small measure of control in a world where you have none. You might even find yourself genuinely enjoying the banter, the friendly rivalry, the brief illusion of normalcy. The medical services, though often overwhelmed, were a vital lifeline, a testament to the human desire to alleviate suffering even in the midst of unimaginable brutality. They were the angels in a hellish landscape, offering what little comfort and hope they could. You are a witness to their tireless efforts, and to the endless procession of broken bodies and shattered minds that passed through their hands. The screams of the wounded, the smell of antiseptic, and the quiet despair of the dying are the grim lullabies of the aid station, a constant reminder of the terrible price of war. A unique and little-known detail about trench life was the prevalence of trench art. Soldiers, with limited materials and endless time, would create intricate carvings from shell casings, pieces of wood, or even bones. They fashioned rings, cigarette cases, and small sculptures, often depicting symbols of their regiments, loved ones, or the grim realities of the war. These were not just idle pastimes. They were a way to process their experiences, to create something beautiful or meaningful out of the destruction, and to send tangible reminders of their existence back home. You might see a comrade meticulously carving a small wooden bird, his brow furrowed in concentration, lost in the quiet act of creation. As the war drags on and you somehow continue to survive the physical onslaught, a more insidious enemy begins its quiet work. The invisible scars of the war, etching themselves deep into your mind and spirit. These aren't the wounds that bleed or fester, but the profound, often unspoken psychological toll that the trenches demand. You feel it in the constant tremor in your hands, the sudden irrational fear at a loud noise, the profound weariness that no amount of sleep can alleviate. The constant sound of distant artillery becomes a strange kind of background noise, almost comforting in its familiarity. You learn to distinguish between the different types of shells, their distinct whistles and thuds telling you something about their trajectory and impact. It's a morbid skill, but a necessary one. You even develop a strange, almost affectionate relationship with your rifle, cleaning it meticulously, knowing that your life depends on its reliable function. It's a cold, hard piece of metal, but it's yours, and it's a constant companion. The constant state of hypervigilance, that perpetual readiness for danger, becomes ingrained. Even when you are away from the immediate front line, perhaps on a brief respite in a rear area, your senses remain on high alert. Every distant sound, every sudden movement, triggers an automatic, primal response. You jump at the sound of a dropped plate, flinch at a car backfiring, your body still living in the world of shells and snipers. This isn't something you can simply turn off. It's a new, unwelcome part of who you are, a constant echo of the terror you've endured. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the true extent to which soldiers maintained their individual identities and sense of self amidst the dehumanizing conditions of trench warfare. Did the collective experience of the trenches erode personal individuality? Or did these small acts of normalcy and personal expression serve to preserve it? It's a complex question, with evidence pointing to both profound psychological changes and remarkable resilience. You, however, are simply trying to hold on to who you were before this nightmare began. Sleep, once a refuge, becomes a battleground. Nightmares, vivid and terrifying. Replay the horrors of the trenches, the screams of the wounded, the faces of the dead, the earth erupting in a shower of mud and metal. You wake up in a cold sweat, your heart pounding, unable to distinguish between the dream and the grim reality you've left behind. Even when you manage to drift into a fitful slumber, the sounds of the front, real or imagined, seep into your consciousness, denying you true rest. You find yourself engaging in surprisingly mundane conversations. Talk of home, of pre-war jobs, of dreams for the future, even of the weather, becomes a way to connect, to remind each other that there was a life before this. And, hopefully, there will be one after. These conversations are often punctuated by the distant sounds of war, a jarring reminder of your reality. But for a few moments, you can pretend you are simply men, gathered together, sharing stories. You might even hear someone complain about the quality of the tea. A surprisingly normal grievance given the circumstances. A common historical fact that has gained significant recognition in modern times is the widespread prevalence of what is now understood as post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) among World War I veterans, though it was then primarily referred to as shell shock. This wasn't merely cowardice or malingering, as many initially believed, but a legitimate and devastating psychological injury caused by prolonged exposure to combat trauma. Imagine trying to explain to your family that you're not just tired, but that the very fabric of your mind has been rewired by the constant terror, leaving you unable to function as you once did. The arrival of fresh rations, however meager, is always a cause for a small celebration. A tin of jam, a few extra biscuits, or even a rare piece of fresh bread feels like a feast. You share it amongst yourselves, savoring every bite, knowing that it might be a long time before such a luxury appears again. The taste, however bland, is a reminder of sustenance, of life, and for a brief moment, the gnawing hunger is appeased. You might even hear a soldier joke that this jam is so good, it almost makes you forget about the rats. Almost. The emotional numbness is another chilling symptom. You find yourself unable to feel joy, sorrow, or even anger with the same intensity as before. The constant exposure to death and suffering has built a protective wall around your emotions, a necessary defense mechanism to survive the immediate horror. But this wall doesn't simply disappear when the danger passes. It remains, leaving you feeling detached, alienated from the very emotions that make you human. You might find it difficult to connect with loved ones, to feel the warmth of their embrace, or to share in their simple pleasures. The sheer boredom, as much as the fear, drives men to seek out any form of entertainment. Reading becomes a precious escape. A worn book, a newspaper from weeks ago. Anything with words is devoured. You read by the dim light of a candle, hunched in your dugout, lost in a world far removed from the mud and the shells. It's a temporary reprieve, a chance to let your mind wander, to forget, if only for a short while, of the grim reality of your surroundings. A unique and little-known detail about the psychological impact was the phenomenon of trench dreams, or war neuroses, that manifested as physical symptoms without apparent physical cause. Soldiers might experience paralysis, blindness, deafness, or uncontrollable tremors, all stemming from the profound psychological trauma. These were not feigned illnesses, but the body's desperate attempt to cope with an unbearable reality, often leading to further stigmatization and misunderstanding. You might see a comrade suddenly unable to move his arm, despite no visible injury, a chilling testament to the mind's power. You learn to appreciate the brief periods of quiet, the lulls in the fighting. These are the moments when you can truly rest, when the tension in your shoulders eases, and your mind is not constantly on high alert. You might even manage a few hours of uninterrupted sleep, a luxury that feels almost decadent. These moments are rare, but they are vital, allowing your body and mind to recover, however slightly, from the relentless strain. The loss of innocence is profound and irreversible. The world you left behind, with its simple pleasures and clear distinctions between right and wrong, seems naive and distant. You have seen the darkest depths of human cruelty and suffering, and it has changed your perception of humanity forever. The idealism you once held has been shattered, replaced by a grim cynicism. You might find it difficult to trust, to believe in grand narratives, or to see the world through anything but a jaded lens. The camaraderie among the soldiers is a powerful force, a bond forged in shared hardship and mutual reliance. You rely on each other for support, for comfort, for survival. You share your fears, your hopes, your last cigarette. These men, who were strangers just weeks or months ago, become your brothers, a family united by the grim realities of the trenches. You would lay down your life for them, and you know they would do the same for you. It's a loyalty born of desperation, but it's a loyalty that runs deeper than blood. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the extent to which the societal response to shell shock shaped its understanding and treatment. Did the initial dismissal and stigmatization by military authorities and the public hinder early research and compassionate care? Or was it an inevitable consequence of a society ill-equipped to understand such widespread psychological trauma? The historical and ethical implications of how these invisible wounds were handled continue to be a subject of intense scholarly debate. You witness small acts of kindness, moments of unexpected humanity that shine like beacons in the darkness. A soldier sharing his last biscuit with a hungry comrade, another helping a wounded man, even under fire. These acts, often unspoken, are a testament to the enduring human spirit, a reminder that even in the most brutal of environments, compassion can still thrive. They are the moments that reaffirm your belief in humanity, even when everything around you seems to deny it. You find yourself struggling with guilt. Guilt for surviving when others didn't. Guilt for the things you had to do to stay alive. Guilt for the memories that haunt you. It's a heavy burden, a constant companion that whispers in the quiet moments, reminding you of the horrors you witnessed and the lives that were lost. This survivor's guilt is a common, agonizing facet of the war's psychological aftermath, a silent torment that can be as debilitating as any physical wound. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the extent to which soldiers retained their moral compass and sense of right and wrong in the face of the extreme violence and dehumanization of trench warfare. Did the constant exposure to brutality desensitize them? Or did their innate sense of morality persist, allowing them to perform acts of kindness and maintain their humanity? It's a complex ethical question, with no easy answers. The inability to articulate your experiences is another source of isolation. How do you explain the smell of decay, the constant fear, the sheer exhaustion, the things you've seen, to someone who has never been there? The words feel inadequate, hollow, unable to convey the true horror of it all. You retreat into yourself, finding solace in the company of other veterans who share a similar, unspoken understanding. The chasm between your reality and that of the civilian world widens, making you feel increasingly alone. You find yourself engaging in small, almost childish acts of rebellion against the monotony. Perhaps you carve your initials into the muddy wall of your dugout, a tiny assertion of your existence. Maybe you collect a particularly interesting piece of shrapnel, a grim souvenir of your time here. These are small T personal acts, but they are important. A way to maintain some sense of individuality in a world that seeks to strip it away. You might even find yourself humming a tune, a melody from home, a small act of defiance against the silence. The constant noise and chaos of the trenches have left you with a heightened sensitivity to sound. Even after the guns fall silent, the ringing in your ears persists, a phantom echo of the bombardments. You might find yourself avoiding crowded places, preferring quiet solitude, as the cacophony of everyday life feels overwhelming and jarring. It's a subtle but pervasive change, a constant reminder of the auditory assault you endured. You might even joke grimly that your ears are so used to explosions. A normal conversation sounds like a whisper. The simple act of cleaning your kit, however futile it may seem against the pervasive mud, becomes a meditative process. You meticulously wipe down your rifle, polish your boots or what's left of them, and try to make your uniform presentable, even if it's only for your own satisfaction. It's a way to impose order on a chaotic world, a small corner of your life that you can control. It's a reminder of discipline, of purpose, even when purpose seems lost. The bonds of camaraderie forged in the trenches, while incredibly strong, also contribute to the sense of loss. You have seen your brothers fall one by one, and each death leaves a gaping hole in your heart. The grief is profound, a silent weight that you carry with you. You miss their laughter, their jokes, their shared understanding. The world feels emptier without them, and the memories of their faces, their voices, become both a comfort and a torment. You learn to appreciate the brief moments of peace, the times when the guns fall silent, and the birdsong can actually be heard. These are rare, precious moments, when the tension in your body eases, and you can almost forget where you are. You might even close your eyes, letting the faint warmth of the sun on your face transport you, if only for a second, to a place far away from the trenches. But the peace is always fleeting, a fragile illusion that can be shattered at any moment by the sudden crack of a rifle or the distant rumble of a shell. The loss of purpose, once the war ends, can be disorienting. For years, your life has been defined by survival, by the immediate goal of defeating the enemy. When that purpose is removed, you are left adrift, struggling to find meaning in a world that seems alien and unfamiliar. The skills you learned in the trenches, how to kill, how to endure, how to survive, seem irrelevant in civilian life. You might feel a profound sense of emptiness, a void where purpose once resided. The jokes, as you recall, are a vital coping mechanism. You hear one about a soldier so covered in mud. He was mistaken for a new trench section by the commanding officer. Another quips that the only thing drier than their biscuits is their sense of humor. And then there's the classic, a weary soldier sighing. I'd kill for a proper bath, or at least a puddle that doesn't have a dead rat in it. These moments of dark levity are essential, a way to release the pressure, to laugh in the face of despair, and to remind each other that you are still human, even in this inhuman place. You might find yourself struggling with anger, a simmering rage beneath the surface. Anger at the politicians who sent you there, at the enemy, at the senseless waste of life, and sometimes even at yourself. It's a volatile emotion, difficult to control, and it can erupt unexpectedly, leaving you feeling ashamed and isolated. This unexpressed anger is another invisible scar, a constant battle fought within. You find yourself reflecting on the absurdity of it all, the grand pronouncements of politicians, the patriotic fervor that sent you here, all seem so distant and meaningless in the face of the mud, the fear and the endless waiting. Your world has shrunk to the confines of this trench, your concerns narrowed to the immediate present. Yet, even in this bleak landscape, you find moments of unexpected resilience, of shared humanity, and of a quiet, desperate hope for a future that seems impossibly far away. You are a survivor, day by day, moment by moment, clinging to the smallest fragments of normalcy in a world gone mad. The simple pleasures of life, once taken for granted, now seem foreign or even unsettling. A comfortable bed, a hot meal, a quiet evening. These things feel too good to be true, almost undeserved. You might find yourself unable to relax, constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the peace to shatter. The war has taught you that comfort is fleeting, and danger is always lurking just beneath the surface of normalcy. You might even quip that a soft mattress feels like a trap, waiting for a shell to land. As you continue your grim existence in the trenches, you begin to understand that this war is unlike any that has come before. It's not just the mud and the fear, it's the relentless, terrifying evolution of weaponry. A grim testament to human ingenuity turned towards destruction. Every day brings the potential for a new, more horrifying way to die, and you are a reluctant witness to this macabre technological arms race. The long-term physical effects of trench life also contribute to the invisible burden. Chronic pain from old wounds, persistent coughs from gas exposure, the lingering effects of trench foot. These are daily reminders of the war. They may not be visible to others, but they are a constant source of discomfort and a barrier to a full recovery. Your body, even if it survived, carries the indelible marks of its ordeal. The most immediate and pervasive threat, beyond the rifle fire, is the artillery. You've heard its distant rumble since your first day, but now you understand its true devastating power. Shells of all sizes, from the whistling shrapnel shells designed to tear through flesh, to the massive high-explosive shells that could level entire sections of trench, are a constant presence. You learn to distinguish their sounds, the initial distant thud of the gun, the rising shriek as the shell approaches, and then the deafening, ground-shaking explosion. You instinctively duck, pressing yourself against the muddy wall, your hands over your head, praying that this isn't your last moment. The earth trembles. Debris rains down, and the air is thick with the acrid smell of cordite. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the intergenerational impact of World War I trauma. Did the psychological wounds carried by veterans affect their families and subsequent generations, leading to patterns of emotional detachment, anxiety, or other psychological difficulties? The concept of inherited trauma and its specific manifestations after the Great War remains a fascinating and sensitive area of historical and psychological research. The journey from the front line to a proper hospital behind the lines could be a long and arduous one. First, the aid station, then perhaps a field ambulance, then a motor ambulance, and finally a hospital train. Each stage offered a slightly better chance of survival and more advanced treatment. But the journey itself was often a trial by endurance for the severely wounded. You might see a hospital train pulling away, its windows dark, carrying its cargo of broken men away from the front. The sense of alienation from civilian society is profound. You feel like an outsider, unable to relate to the concerns and experiences of those who did not fight. Their complaints seem trivial, their joys superficial. You carry a secret knowledge, a shared experience with only a select few, and this knowledge sets you apart. You might find yourself seeking out other veterans, drawn to their unspoken understanding, their shared burden. Then there are the machine guns. These aren't the clunky, slow-firing weapons of earlier wars. These are highly efficient, rapid-fire instruments of death. Their distinctive, rhythmic stutter becomes another grim soundtrack to your life. You've seen their devastating effect on men trying to cross no man's land, cutting them down in swathes, turning brave charges into futile massacres. The thought of facing one of these weapons head-on fills you with a cold dread. You might even hear a dark joke about the machine guns needing their own tea breaks. Given how much work they put in, you might find yourself resorting to coping mechanisms, some healthy, some less so. Alcohol might offer a temporary escape from the nightmares, a brief numbing of the pain. Isolation might seem preferable to the effort of connecting with others. These are desperate attempts to manage the overwhelming weight of your experiences, to find some semblance of peace in a mind that has been irrevocably altered. The development of the machine gun fundamentally changed the nature of warfare, making frontal assaults incredibly costly and contributing significantly to the stalemate of the trenches. An interesting and little-known detail is that early machine guns, like the Maxim, were often water-cooled to prevent overheating during sustained fire, requiring soldiers to carry heavy water containers to keep them operational. Imagine trying to lug those heavy containers through the mud, all while under fire, just to keep your weapon from seizing up. It adds another layer of grim complexity to the already arduous task of fighting. The constant feeling of being watched, a paranoia born from the presence of snipers and enemy patrols, can persist long after the war. You might find yourself constantly scanning your surroundings, checking over your shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that danger is lurking just out of sight. It's a subtle but pervasive anxiety, a shadow that follows you wherever you go. You might even joke that you still check for snipers before crossing the street. Just in case. And then there's gas. The first time you experience a gas attack, it's a truly terrifying experience. The warning cry, gas, 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 sends a jolt of pure adrenaline through your body. You fumble for your gas mask, your hands shaking, the rubber and glass feeling clumsy and suffocating as you pull it over your face. The air immediately becomes heavy, thick with the sickly sweet smell of chlorine or the acrid scent of phosgene. You can feel your lungs burning, your eyes watering, even through the mask. You watch as the insidious greenish-yellow cloud rolls slowly across no man's land, a silent, deadly wave consuming everything in its path. It's an invisible enemy, a chemical horror that preys on your deepest fears. The war has changed you fundamentally and irrevocably. The young man who first stumbled into the trenches is gone, replaced by someone older, wiser, and infinitely more scarred. The innocence is lost, the idealism shattered, and the world is seen through a darker yet more cynical lens. These are the invisible wounds, the silent burdens that veterans carry, a testament to the terrible price of war, a price that continues to be paid long after the last shot is fired. The echoes of the past, the whispers of the dead, and the constant tremor of a mind on edge are the grim lullabies of a life forever marked by the trenches. The use of chemical weapons introduced a new level of psychological terror. Soldiers not only feared the physical effects of the gas, blindness, blistering, agonizing suffocation, but also the psychological impact of fighting an enemy that couldn't be seen or fought directly. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the long-term health effects of exposure to these various chemical agents on the surviving soldiers, with some historians arguing that the full extent of the damage was only understood decades after the war. The lingering coughs, the chronic respiratory problems, were they just a result of the trenches or the silent legacy of gas? As the final weary days of the war finally begin to fade, and the distant rumble of artillery slowly, miraculously, dies down, you are left not with a sense of triumph, but with a profound, unsettling quiet. The silence, once a terrifying absence of sound, now feels heavy, almost oppressive. It's the silence of a world irrevocably changed, a landscape scarred beyond recognition, and a generation of men forever altered by the crucible of the trenches. You stand amidst the ruins, a survivor, but the war in its own insidious way has claimed a part of you that can never be recovered. You learn to recognize the different types of gas, each with its own horrifying characteristics. Chlorine, the first major gas used, had caused a burning sensation in the throat and chest, leading to suffocation. Phosgene was more insidious, often odorless and causing symptoms to appear hours after exposure, leading to fluid in the lungs. Mustard gas, introduced later, was perhaps the most feared, causing severe blistering of the skin, eyes, and respiratory tract, often leading to blindness and agonizing pain. You might even hear a grim joke that at least the gas helped clear out the rats for a bit. The immediate aftermath is a bizarre mix of relief and disorientation. The orders to cease fire, when they finally come, are met not with cheers but with a stunned, almost disbelieving silence. You look at your comrades, their faces streaked with mud and exhaustion, and you see the same blank incomprehension in their eyes. Is it truly over? Can it really be true? The transition from the constant threat of death to the sudden, jarring absence of it is almost too much to process. Your body, accustomed to hypervigilance, still twitches at phantom sounds. Your mind still races with imagined dangers. The development of tanks, while still in their infancy, also begins to change the landscape of the battlefield. The first time you see one lumbering across no man's land, a monstrous, clanking metal beast, it's a truly awe-inspiring yet terrifying sight. They move slowly, but inexorably, crushing barbed wire and shrugging off rifle fire. While often unreliable and prone to breaking down in the early days, their potential to break the trench stalemate is clear. You might hear a comrade marvel, "Well, at least something can get through this mud without sinking." The landscape itself is the most visible legacy, no man's land. Once a vibrant patchwork of fields and villages, is now a desolate wasteland of shell craters, twisted barbed wire, and unexploded ordnance. Trees are splintered stumps, Roads are impassable quagmires, and the very earth is churned and rechurned, a testament to the unimaginable violence it has endured. You walk through it, a ghost in a graveyard, and the silence is punctuated only by the mournful cry of a bird or the distant murmur of recovery teams. This land will bear the scars of the war for generations, a silent, grim monument to human folly. The constant innovation in weaponry meant that soldiers were always adapting, always learning new ways to fight and survive. From flamethrowers, which brought a new, horrifying dimension to close-quarters combat, to the development of aerial reconnaissance and bombing, the war pushed the boundaries of military technology at an unprecedented pace. You see the biplanes buzzing overhead, sometimes dropping bombs, sometimes just observing, and you know that even the sky is no longer safe. A common historical fact, often brought to light in archaeological digs, is the vast quantity of unexploded ordnance that still litters the battlefields of the Western Front. Even a century later, farmers still unearth shells, grenades, and bullets. A constant, dangerous reminder of the war's enduring physical presence. Imagine trying to rebuild your life on land that still holds the silent, deadly remnants of such a conflict, where every plow turn could unearth a lethal surprise. It's a chilling thought, a testament to the war's refusal to truly end. The engineers and inventors behind these weapons were often far removed from the grim realities of the front, working in laboratories and factories, perfecting their deadly creations. You might even wonder about the minds that conceived of such horrors, the cold logic that led to the development of instruments designed solely for mass destruction. It's a chilling thought, contrasting sharply with the desperate, muddy struggle for survival you face every day. The return home is not the joyous reunion you might have imagined. The world you left behind feels alien, unfamiliar. The sounds of civilian life, children laughing, church bells ringing, the bustle of a marketplace are jarring, almost overwhelming after years of artillery and machine guns. People look at you with a mixture of admiration, pity, and a profound lack of understanding. They ask questions you can't answer, express sentiments you can't share. How do you explain the smell of decay, the constant fear, the camaraderie forged in hell, to someone who has never known anything but peace? The sheer noise of the battlefield is another form of torture, a constant, overwhelming cacophony of explosions, gunfire, and screams. Your ears ring constantly, and you often find yourself shouting just to be heard over the din. It's a soundscape of hell, and it contributes to the pervasive sense of unease and the psychological toll of the war. You might even joke that you'll be deaf as a post by the time this is over, if you're lucky enough to make it. A unique and little-known detail about the immediate post-war period was the phenomenon of phantom trenches. Veterans, even years after returning home, would sometimes experience vivid hallucinations or sensations of being back in the trenches, hearing the sounds of battle, smelling the familiar stench, or feeling the mud clinging to their boots. These weren't just nightmares, they were waking experiences, a testament to the profound and lasting impact of the trauma on their minds. You might find yourself suddenly ducking at the sound of a distant car horn, your body reacting as if it were a shell. Despite the technological advancements, the human element remains crucial. You still rely on your rifle, your bayonet, and your courage in close combat. The training you received, however inadequate it felt at the time, now proves invaluable. You learn to conserve ammunition, to reload quickly under pressure, and to aim true. Your life and the lives of your comrades depend on your skill and your ability to remain calm in the face of overwhelming danger. The invisible wounds, those psychological scars you've carried, now become more pronounced in the absence of immediate danger. The hypervigilance, the nightmares, the emotional numbness, the guilt, they are no longer suppressed by the need for immediate survival. They surface, raw and agonizing, making it difficult to reintegrate into civilian life. You struggle with sleep, with relationships, with finding purpose. The world expects you to be the same man who left, but that man is gone, replaced by someone forever marked by the trenches. The development of trench mortars, simple but effective weapons that could lob shells directly into enemy trenches, also added to the daily terror. You hear the distinctive thump as the mortar round is fired, followed by a brief, agonizing wait before the shell lands with a dull explosion. They were particularly effective for harassing enemy positions and breaking up wire entanglements, making them a constant nuisance and a deadly threat. You might even curse their simplicity, knowing how effective they are at making your life miserable. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the extent to which the post-war societal structures and medical understanding failed to adequately support returning veterans suffering from psychological trauma. Did the lack of recognition and resources for shell shock contribute to widespread personal suffering, family breakdown, and social alienation for an entire generation of men? The historical responsibility for the long-term care of these veterans remains a complex and often painful topic. The constant threat of snipers is another insidious danger. You learn to keep your head down, to move cautiously, to avoid exposing yourself unnecessarily. A single, well-aimed shot can end your life in an instant. And the thought of an unseen enemy watching your every move is deeply unsettling. You scan the enemy parapet, searching for any telltale glint of light, any subtle movement that might betray a sniper's position. It's a silent, deadly game of cat and mouse, played out across the desolate expanse of no man's land. You find solace, if any, in the company of other veterans. They are the only ones who truly understand, who share the unspoken knowledge of what you've been through. You gather in quiet pubs, in veterans' halls, sharing grim jokes and silent nods of recognition. There's a bond between you that transcends words, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of war. You don't need to explain, they already know. You might even joke that the only people who truly understand you now are the ones who also spent years arguing with rats over a biscuit. The sheer destructive power of these new weapons means that the landscape itself is constantly changing. Shell craters become massive, water-filled pits, impassable obstacles that must be navigated with extreme caution. Trees are reduced to splintered stumps, their branches torn away by explosions. The earth is churned and rechurned, a desolate, scarred wasteland that bears little resemblance to the fields and villages that once stood here. You are living in a landscape of perpetual destruction, a testament to the relentless power of modern warfare. The physical scars, too, are a constant reminder. The limp from an old shrapnel wound, the persistent cough from gas exposure, the missing fingers from a trench accident. These are visible marks that set you apart. They are a testament to your survival, but also a source of chronic pain and a barrier to returning to your old life. You learn to live with them, to adapt, but they are always there, a physical manifestation of the war's enduring legacy. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is whether the technological advancements of World War I, particularly the defensive capabilities of machine guns and artillery, truly outpaced the offensive tactics of the time, leading to the prolonged stalemate, or if the military leadership simply failed to adapt quickly enough to the new realities of the battlefield. It's a complex interplay of technology, strategy, and human decision-making that continues to be analyzed. You, however, are just trying to survive the next barrage. The memory of your fallen comrades is a heavy burden. You carry their faces, their voices, their last moments with you. They are the silent witnesses to your survival, and their absence leaves a gaping hole in your heart. You visit memorials, attend somber ceremonies, and sometimes, in the quiet of the night, you whisper their names, ensuring that their sacrifice is not forgotten. Their ghosts walk beside you, a constant reminder of the price of peace. You find yourself developing a strange familiarity with the different types of explosions. The sharp, cracking sound of a rifle grenade, the dull thud of a mortar, the earth-shaking roar of a heavy artillery shell. Each has its own distinct signature, its own promise of danger. You learn to react instinctively, to drop, to cover, to brace yourself for the impact. It's a grim education, learned through constant exposure to violence. You might even find yourself critiquing the enemy's aim, in a morbid sort of way, if a shell misses its mark. The political and social landscape of the world is also irrevocably changed. Empires have fallen, new nations have risen, and the seeds of future conflicts have been sown. The war, which was supposed to end all wars, has instead laid the groundwork for further instability and violence. You, a simple soldier, are a witness to this grand, tragic irony, a participant in a conflict that reshaped the world in ways no one could have foreseen. You might even hear someone quip that the politicians who started this war should have been forced to spend a week in the trenches, just to see if their grand plan still seemed so grand. The constant innovation also means that captured enemy equipment is often studied and sometimes even adopted. You might see your engineers examining a new type of enemy grenade or a piece of their trench mortar, trying to understand its strengths and weaknesses. It's a continuous cycle of development and counter-development, each side striving to gain a technological edge, however slight, over the other. The war is not just fought with men and guns, it's fought with minds and machines. The economic impact is profound. Industries have been decimated, economies shattered, and an entire generation of men has been removed from the workforce, either through death, injury, or psychological trauma. The cost of the war, both in human lives and financial resources, is staggering, and it will take decades, if not centuries, for the world to truly recover. You see the poverty, the unemployment, the struggle, and you know that the war's grip extends far beyond the battlefield. The psychological impact of facing such advanced weaponry is profound. You're no longer fighting an enemy with similar tools. You're facing a relentless, impersonal machine of destruction. The individual bravery of a soldier seems almost insignificant in the face of such overwhelming power. Yet, you continue to fight, to endure, to resist. It's a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience, even when confronted with the most terrible instruments of war. You are a small, vulnerable figure in a vast, deadly game, but you are still playing. The cultural legacy is also immense. The literature, art, and music of the post-war period are deeply influenced by the experiences of the trenches. Poets write of the mud and the despair. Artists depict the shattered landscapes, and musicians compose somber melodies that reflect the profound sense of loss. The war becomes a defining moment, a watershed in human history, shaping the collective consciousness for generations to come. The constant threat of being buried alive by a collapsing trench or a direct shell hit is another terrifying prospect. You've seen it happen. The sudden cave-in, the frantic digging to rescue trapped comrades, often in vain. The earth, your only shelter, can also become your tomb. It adds another layer of anxiety to your already frayed nerves, a reminder that even when you're safe in the trench, you're never truly safe. You might even hear a soldier grimly joke that at least if you get buried, you won't have to deal with the mud anymore. One of the academic debates still open for discussion is the extent to which the memory and interpretation of World War I have been shaped by national narratives and political agendas. How have different countries chosen to remember and commemorate the conflict? And what impact has this had on their national identities and foreign policies? The ongoing memory wars surrounding the Great War highlight its enduring power to shape contemporary understanding. You continue to cling to the small moments of normalcy, the letters from home, the shared cigarettes, the dark humor. These are the anchors that keep you tethered to sanity in a world that seems determined to drive you mad. The technology of death may be advancing at an alarming rate, but the human spirit, in its own stubborn way, continues to resist, to find ways to cope, to survive. One terrifying, muddy, shell-shocked day at a time. The echoes of explosions and the stutter of machine guns are your constant companions. A grim lullaby that sings you to a restless sleep. You find yourself with a profound, almost spiritual connection to the earth itself. The mud, which was once your tormentor, now feels like a part of you. The shell craters, the twisted barbed wire, these are not just scars on the land, but scars on your soul. You have witnessed the Earth's capacity for both destruction and resilience, and it has changed your relationship with the natural world forever. You might even joke that you can still taste the mud in your tea, even years later. Beyond the mud, the shells, and the gas, there's another hidden war being fought, one that takes place beneath your very feet. This is the subterranean struggle, a silent, claustrophobic battle waged by tunnelers and miners. A grim game of cat and mouse played out in the dark. Damp earth beneath the trenches. You become acutely aware of it. A constant, unsettling presence. A low hum of activity that you can sometimes feel vibrating through the ground. The feeling of being a lost generation is pervasive. You and your comrades are the ones who survived. But at what cost? You have seen too much, experienced too much, and the world you knew is gone. You are adrift, struggling to find your place in a society that doesn't quite understand you. It's a silent, collective burden, a shared sense of profound loss that binds you together, even as it isolates you from others. You hear stories, whispered in the dugouts, of enemy tunnelers attempting to dig beneath your lines, planting massive mines designed to blow entire sections of trench and the men within them into oblivion. The thought of the ground beneath you suddenly erupting, sending you flying into the air amidst a shower of earth and human remains, is a chilling prospect. It adds another layer of paranoia to your already frayed nerves. You find yourself listening intently, straining to hear any unnatural sounds from below. A faint pickaxe striking rock, the muffled murmur of voices, anything that might betray their presence. The simple act of remembrance becomes incredibly important. The poppies blooming in the fields, the quiet ceremonies on Armistice Day, the names carved into stone memorials. These are the ways in which society tries to acknowledge the sacrifice. You participate silently, solemnly, your mind filled with the faces of those who did not return. It's a bittersweet ritual, a necessary act of honoring the dead, but also a painful reminder of the living's enduring grief. Your own side has its tunnelers too. Brave and often anonymous men who spend their days and nights burrowing into the earth, attempting to counter the enemy's efforts or to plant their own devastating charges. They are a breed apart, their faces perpetually covered in grime, their eyes accustomed to the perpetual darkness. You see them emerge from their shafts, covered in mud, exhausted, but with a grim determination. Their work is vital, a silent, unseen battle that can turn the tide of a local engagement. The war has left an indelible mark on your soul, a permanent shadow that will follow you for the rest of your days. You may rebuild your life, find new purpose, and even experience moments of joy. But the trenches will always be a part of you. The smell of the mud, the sound of the shells, the faces of your comrades, they are etched into your memory. A grim tapestry of experiences that have shaped you into the person you are now. A common historical fact, often highlighted in accounts of the Western Front, is the scale of mining operations. Entire companies of engineers and miners were dedicated to this task, digging tunnels that could stretch for hundreds of meters, sometimes even kilometers, beneath enemy lines. These tunnels were often shored up with timber, but they were still incredibly dangerous, prone to collapse, flooding, and the ever-present threat of enemy countermining. Imagine spending weeks, even months, in such conditions, knowing that at any moment the earth could collapse around you, or an enemy charge could blow you to pieces. The enduring legacy of the First World War trenches is not just in the physical scars on the land or the visible wounds on the body, but in the profound, invisible marks left on the minds and spirits of those who endured them. It's a legacy of trauma, resilience, and a quiet, persistent understanding of the true cost of human conflict. You are a living testament to that legacy, a silent witness to the terrible secrets that lie buried in the mud, whispered in the wind, and forever etched into the heart of a generation. As the last sounds of war fade, a deep silence falls over you. No more artillery fire, no more machine gun fire, just silence. A heavy, sorrowful silence. You close your eyes, breathe deeply, feel the breeze on your face. The horrors of the trenches begin to fade, replaced by more distant memories of a green field in the morning sun, of birds chirping in your garden. You are no longer there. You are back. The invisible scars remain, but you have overcome them. Let those memories fade into the darkness, like old ships drifting toward the horizon. Let your mind rest, heal. You are safe. You have made it. Let your dreams take you away. The conditions in these tunnels are even worse than in the trenches. The air is thick and stale, often filled with dust and the smell of damp earth. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the flickering light of a candle or a small lamp. The space is incredibly cramped, forcing you to crawl on your hands and knees for long stretches. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic scrape of a shovel, the dull thud of earth being moved, or the frantic pounding of your own heart. It's a world of claustrophobia and isolation, where every sound is magnified, and every breath feels precious.